So the great 20th century Jewish teacher Martin Buber liked to tell a Hasidic story about a certain rabbi named Zusya. Now Zusya was on his deathbed. He was quickly approaching the end of his life, and his students were gathered around him. And he turned to his students, and he said, "In the coming world, they will not ask me, 'Why were you not Moses?' They will ask me, 'Why were you not Zusya?'" So now as Christians who were seeking to follow Jesus, God help us, so would it be fair then to adapt this story and to say, in the coming world, when we stand before the glory of God, they will not ask me, "Why were you not Jesus?" They will ask me, "Why were you not Nathaniel?" The secret is that when we become more fully our true selves, when we live deeply and truly beyond our false self, but deeply into who God has truly created us to be, we do, in fact, become more Christ-like. In our own peculiar ways, flawed as we are, despite ourselves, sometimes, but supported by the grace of God, we can grow to be truer to that of Christ in us as we become truer to our true selves. Christians, as we learned, means little Christlings, like little ducklings, but little Christlings. So as Christians, we see in Jesus a model of the utmost fulfillment of the deepest human identity and purpose as children of the living God. And now Jesus embodies for us an ideal that's free of sin and in fact impossible for anyone to live up to. But it's missing the point if we think that that means that we should just feel miserable and wretched about ourselves, about not how far we fall short of not being like Jesus. And it's missing the point if we think we need to then really bend ourselves out of shape to try to become something that we're not. The way of Jesus is about the love and the grace of our Creator for us as we are. And when we receive this love of God, this can release us from the false parts of ourselves and can help us to be more true to ourselves in the deepest sense. God's grace activates our souls and helps us to grow more into who we are created to be. And so the way of Jesus is about freeing people. This is why he was a healer. Freeing people from all the forces that keep us deadened or keep us out of our right minds, dislocated from who we truly are and why we truly are. The glory of God is a human being fully alive. I've said it before, I'm going to say it again, according to the early Christian teacher Irenaeus. The glory of God is a human being fully alive. Howard Thurman, the great spiritual mentor of the civil rights movement, asked the same thing to those that he ministered to. What makes you come alive? He asked people. And this is what Jesus asks of us. This is what God calls us to. And this is what God calls us to not only for our own sake, because if we're only in it for our own sake, we're not truly alive in this deepest sense, but for the sake of each other, for the sake of this world, for the sake of God and the glory of God, for the sake of the realm of heaven on earth. So when we're honest to God and honest to ourselves about this question, am I being truly who I am? Truly who God has created me to be? We'll probably become aware, well, of some of the ways that we are, right? What does make us come alive? We can become aware of that and be grateful for that and celebrate that. But we can also become aware of the ways that we're not. If the honest answer is, not quite. And we can become aware of the reasons why not. Am I caught up in trying to be someone who I'm not? Am I caught up in only being who other people want me to be? Am I caught up in playing a role or striving after appearances or caught up in displaying who it is that I want other people to think that I am, and have missed whether I am, in fact, who I want to be, right? Am I caught up in my fears that are keeping me little? Am I hiding out to protect myself? Or am I caught up in asserting myself over and above others, who I think I am or who I want others to think I am, by dishing out judgment and hostility and pushing other people around and putting them down? And so on. So if the honest answer to any of these kinds of questions is yes, it's important to bring that to God. That's part of what prayer can do when we put ourselves in the presence of God. And we can begin to see how underneath any of this false self stuff is anxiety. Anxiety that, as I am, I'm not enough. If truly as I am, flaws and all, I'm not worthy of love or value. So I have to pretend, try to fill this hole with all this stuff that honestly doesn't fulfill that deepest need. It doesn't work. We always have to be striving after the next. Only God can fulfill that deepest need, our deepest belonging as humble beings who are created good and created worthy of love as we are by our holy Creator. Now, what's also true is that for a lot of people, the reasons that it's hard to live fully into who God has created them to be is because of really desperate circumstances outside of their control. When you're desperately just trying to survive, constantly under threat, it's hard to flourish as a human being. Now, there are amazing people who do. Jesus was one of them. But the desperate circumstances outside of people's control can deaden the soul, right? It can distort the personality. And this is why war is terrible. One of the reasons. This is why slavery is terrible. One of the reasons. This is why oppression is evil. This is why exploitation is evil. This is why any form of human sin is evil that tries to destroy life and the possibility of life. That seeks to suffocate the inherent worth and dignity of others. Right? And this is why we see Jesus time and again confronting these forces of sin in his world with the saving power of divine love, of bringing new life from death, restoring the personhood of all he encountered whose worth and dignity had been denied. And this is why Jesus calls on all of us to turn away from these forces of sin, however they're on work in our lives, in our world, the ways that we distort ourselves and distort others, so that we can return to our true belonging in God, who receives us in grace and forgives us and restores us, who God created us to be. And then when we say yes to this, to who we are, wherever we are in life's journey, as we like to say, it really helps to do that in community, because that's part of what helps us to come alive, especially in a more or less healthy community, with other folks who are seeking sincerely to say yes, as best we can, to this transforming power of God's grace. And when we say yes to this, as people of the way of Jesus, what can happen when folks then feel free to grow more deeply into who their truest God-given selves truly are, is that we start to show and to share gifts for ministry. And we take this very seriously in the United Church of Christ. Churches are a school of love. Church is about, as a mentor of mine said, the activation of souls. And then part of what happens through that is ministry. And so ministry is not only for those of us who flap around in these robes up front. They don't fit too well and get kind of hot on hot days. Ministry is what we're all doing together here, when our souls get activated here and there through our encounter with Jesus and the living God. So in the United Church of Christ, we believe, I quote, "All members of the United Church of Christ are called to minister to others and to participate as equals in the common worship of God, each with direct access to the mercies of God through personal prayer and devotion." And as part of this, it's very important that we remove the barriers that far too often have denied the gift of ministry from folks, for all the various reasons that the gifts of ministry have been denied for folks. Most often because someone inhabits the wide world outside the kingdom of straight white man. And so it's been really important, and it's been a blessing in the United Church of Christ that we've been able to overcome, and it's a struggle and it's incomplete, but these barriers to full and equal participation in the life and the leadership of the church, regardless of anyone's gender or sexual orientation or any other marker of identity. And it's a sin to deny the gifts of ministry for someone who can offer that. And it's been a blessing to be a part of churches that have been sincere in trying to overcome this, and instead have welcomed the gifts that everyone can bring to all parts of the community of life in our community of faith, including ordained ministry. And so whoever you are, wherever you are on life's journey, God is calling you by name to live more deeply and truly into who God has created you to be. And I celebrate and give thanks for all of the ways that you have said yes to this. And I celebrate and give thanks for all the opportunities to continue to say yes to this, and the challenge of saying yes to this. And when we do this in the way of Jesus, with God at the center, as best we can, as flawed human beings as we are, this activates gifts for ministry in whatever way, shape, or form accords to the gifts that we have as individuals. And so let me end with a prayer for the awakening of the soul by John Philip Newell. Awake, O my soul, and know the sacred dignity of your being. Awake to it in every living soul this day. Honor it, defend it, in heart and mind, in word and deed. Awake, O my soul, and know the sacred dignity of your being. Thanks be to God, and to God be the glory. Amen.